Radio Cairo, FM 95.4. The Voice of Egypt.
This is World of Info from Radio Cairo, and it's exactly 4 p.m. We are coming live from Radio Cairo, FM 95.4. Studio 3, and our telephone line is 2578-9407. This is Dr. Amr Mabrouk talking today, speaking about the world of books. Well, you know the rules of the game, and of course the game is the world of books. We are going to give you 4 books that were the collection of the month, and we are going to discuss these 4 books, and we'll give you a suggestion. Should we read these books, toss them, or skim them, or just think of them? So this is the game, and the 4 books are coming right to your way. So today is the world of books, and today we are having 4 books. The first book is by Mr. Omar Taher, a writer, a journalist that everybody loves, and whenever he writes a book, usually it's a bestseller. And today this book is his latest, and it is the bestseller in Cairo today, and it is really a very nice book. It's a novel, and usually Omar Taher writes articles or write things that are related to each other, like small scripted portrait of many things which are attached together, like a small puzzle game. But this book by Omar Taher is called Kuhl wa Habbahan, and it's the bestseller of this month in January. And why is this book a bestseller? Definitely, it gives you a glimpse of a normal and ordinary life of a human being, somebody who is not that important, somebody who is living among us, a person who has been living in this country, in Cairo, and he's not involved in politics, he's not involved in anything, but he's living an ordinary life. And this gentleman who's living an ordinary life is writing to us in this book about two important periods of his life. The first period is the 4 days of a 14-year-old kid living in a remote city, which is most probably the same city that the author has been living in, which is in Naga Hammadi in Upper Egypt. But he doesn't mention the name of the city. He doesn't mention or give you a glimpse of what is the name of the city. And yet you can read, if you are a regular reader of Amr Tahir, you will understand that he's describing his own city where he used to live with his family during high school. After that, this kid went to Cairo to study in the Faculty of Commerce over there, and where he is going to be whatever he's going to be. But then the main character in this novel is not a writer. He is simply a gentleman who went to the Faculty of Pharmacy, became a pharmacist, and is living in Cairo working in one of the big pharmaceutical companies. But what is so characteristic and what is bonding the main character with the time that he was a young kid at the age of 14, and the gentleman that he has been in his 30s and 40s in Cairo, where it is food. And that's what is so unique about this novel. The fact that, like a lot of people of us, who really mark their days with the food, with the life of the time that they are living at. And of course the fact that this time of food and that the type of food that he's living and waiting or looking at is quite different. So how about that? After the break we'll discuss that. So we are talking about books, and we are talking especially about the book of Amr Tahir, Kuhlu Habbahan, the book that is talking about a foodie person. And what's the definition of a foodie person? Is a person who really loves food. It's not necessarily that he is overeating, but he enjoys food. And a lot of people that you know and I know who are really enjoy food, and they feel like to correlate their lives and their times with food. So for example, this guy or this kid, when he was quite young, whenever he's climbing the stairs to the 4th floor where he's living, he can always discriminate the types of smells that all the neighbors are cooking. This person or this family or this lady is cooking this fish or this type of aubergine or this type of rice or this type of stuffed vegetables. All that is related to his memory. Always there is a relation between this type of food and this type of event. What happened and how he is enjoying his life by always telling his mother, who is the best cook in town, about what should they eat on that day or on next day or whatever. So correlating the life and the time with food, this is quite interesting. The way that Amr Tahir is describing food gives you an idea that in spite of the fact that this gentleman is not that obese and he is not that foodie, but yet he was able to convey to us the message that how this food is going. In the next episode or the next part of the book, he always tells us that when this boy became an adult and a man who is not really involved in any emotional relation, he didn't get engaged or get married, but still he's going around with his friends to visit all the restaurants around in Cairo and knowing exactly where is the best cook in town, what type of food should we eat in this restaurant or not, enjoying and going all through the restaurants of Cairo. This is something that really can be amazing experience. And the fact that he is correlating this like little conquests of his to different restaurants in Egypt or in Cairo, this brings the man into having a close friendship with the chefs, with the shop owners, with the restaurant owners, and having this time. And so when he met a lady or young lady who is a colleague of his, she attracted his attention because she is also a good cook, and she definitely enjoys going to restaurants and examining the foods and different types of foods. So when he wanted to attract her attention to become in a real emotional relation and a romantic relation, he decided that he's going to cook for her. But what type of food should she have with him? What type of food should he give? Well, this is something that is of a great interest. So when Amr Tahir is talking about Kohl and Habbahan and about the types of food and how he is going to get in a relation with this lady, which it will end with marriage, this is something that is simple life of an ordinary man, but yet an ordinary man who really loves with great romanticism, and a man who really loves the time and the types of food around him, correlating this to his life. So how food is related to you, and how types of Egyptian food that really matches your taste and matches your occasion, something of great interest to read among the busy life of Cairo about foods and human beings. Really an interesting book which deserves to be read, and I believe that you can just finish this book in 2 or 3 hours continuously. You're not going to take any time or in a gap of time, because you'll definitely like to finish it up before dinner. So Amr Tahir, Kohl wa Habbahan, a really bestseller that deserves to be read.
So back again, World of Info with Dr. Amr Mabrouk, and
World of
another
books.
book to present.
Well, I think the next book is a very interesting book, which is called Think Like a Freak, and it is the second book about Freakonomics. You know, you remember this was a bestseller, so the two authors are putting themselves on the edge by writing another book about how to be a freak and how to write, to deal and think like a freak. And the idea is the most important thing in order to solve any problem is simply to say the golden words that really don't fit in the dictionary of a lot of people. Always, whenever you're asked about something, you would always like to have a say. You would always say, I know everything.
Yes.
And as you know, that the famous wordings that used to be mentioned about King Farouk when he was quite young, and unfortunately he was not properly educated. So always when somebody is telling him a story or telling him a piece of information, he would say in French, je sais. So they used to call him Monsieur Je sais. And this is not just the King Farouk, but everybody who is living on the planet would like and would enjoy to say, I know. Well, the wording from the book by Dubner and Levitt is simply say, please use the expression and use the sentence of I don't know. You have to repeat that after me. When you say I don't know, you maybe will have the edge to know and to learn. But if you are always saying something, or you have an opinion about something, as if you are a great expert in football, in strategy, or in careful and constructive thinking, you would always say, I know.
This reminds me of the movie Chris Gardner, when he, in The Pursuit of Happiness, when he was in an interview. And Will Smith, the famous, he said to the interviewee, if I'm the kind of person, when you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know, but I will promise you, I research and find you the answer.
Yes.
So
research. And they are always saying, one of the chapters is carefully written, the address of it, which is like a bad dye job. The truth is in the roots. So this is quite interesting, because usually if you want to know the truth, you have to search. So the whole idea of thinking like a freak is that you have to go on searching and see what is the problem, and therefore seek for a solution. The problem is that we are always thinking that we have the golden solution for everything, and that we can really solve the problem, and we can reach a simple diagnosis just by saying, I know. Actually, dear listeners, all of us don't really know, and all of us have to do our homework and search for an answer for our problems, not saying just we know. So after the break, we'll give you examples from how to think like a freak.
Back again, Word of Info, and you can call us at 2578-9407. This is Word of Info, and today's Word of Books with Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. So back again, Word of Info with Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University, and the Think Like a Freak.
Yes, the thing that we have to learn from this book really is fact that simply when kids are asked some questions in kindergarten or in school, in early school days, they would always like to fake something or to say something about it, even if they are not given the right things in the story that they are asked about. So the idea is try always to search for the answer and try always to find something to give the right answer, not just by saying or by claiming that you are correct all through the way. The most important things as well is that you have to think like a child in the end of the day. And thinking like a child, making the right choice, because the children always know black and white. They don't know the color gray. So if you are thinking like a child, most probably you will be on the right track. So it's like giving a candy to the baby or believing in what you are doing and finding the real information is to make you able to persuade people who don't want to be persuaded. So reading a book like that or thinking like a freak might put you on the right track to solve some problems in your life. I don't claim that this book can solve my problems, but definitely it solved the problems of Livid and Dobner because they are having another bestseller and a book that is always purchased by a lot of people. So they are making a brand, right? Okay. So after the break, we'll deal with another interesting book.
Yes. So back again, you can call us 257-89407, and this is Word of Info. Back again, Word of Info and another book.
Well, the other book is Days of Blood. Yes, it talks about all the massacres that happened in the Middle East in ancient times, until from Karbala till what happened in the citadel during Muhammad Ali's reign in the early 19th century. So the book is written in a very beautiful prose by Mr. Walid Fikri. Walid Fikri is a young gentleman who has great interest in history, who reads a lot of books and just summarize them and put them in a more or less like a novel-like style. And he is keeping the scientific way by writing in the end of every chapter all the sources that he has written. And he has published a lot of books that really have attracted the attention of a lot of readers and became bestsellers. He has a history from another perspective, history in the dark, the blood of the caliphs, the blood of the Mamluks, and myths, holy misses, and this book which is Days of Blood. And it talks about all the massacres that happened. And in order to summarize all these tragic events, it will be very hard. I think you better read this book. But what is important is how, as a historian, whether he is professional or an amateur, is writing and analyzing what's important. Is that when we are discussing the history and lives of every person who has been living in these times and how the massacre was induced by somebody in particular, should we put always the blame on this person who is responsible for these massacres, or we should deal with him as if he is the son of his age? Because in different ages, in the medieval periods, in the periods before the medieval periods, in the old times, always what's happening to these characters or what these characters are inflicting on other people is simply because they are the product of their times. And so when we're talking about the horrible accident, the horrible massacre that happened in Karbala with the Hussein radiallahu anhu, who is the grandchild of the Prophet Muhammad, when he was going to Karbala and he has been surrounded under siege by people who didn't think twice in killing him and slaughtering him, and he is what he is. He is the grandchild of the Prophet, the direct grandchild of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the people who were massacred with him are his closest family. If not for the fact that one of his sons was not feeling well, and these killers didn't kill him, otherwise there would never have been grandchildren of the Prophet. So when we are reading this particular incident, and we're thinking how people can be that brute, how people can be that criminal, and the Prophet has just died earlier, maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago. This is very harsh for us to understand, and very hard to understand. Other incidents can really be described in terror. What Khalifa or Hakim Amr, who was ruling Egypt, who is definitely a certified schizoid, a man with definitely a lot of psychopathic attitude, sociopathic, psychopathic, and everything in the book. You can talk about a real nutcase, and some people are considering him to be a god. When you see how Hakim Amr was brutalizing Cairo, and how he died or disappeared mysteriously, you can really feel like, wow, could have this really happened? When you are analyzing and looking backwards at the fact that Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, the great sultan, and I always believe that he was a great man, a man who was able to control a situation that was almost a desperate situation. When the Crusaders have been in Egypt for in the Middle East for quite a long time, and they've been abusing everyone, Salah ad-Din was the man who was able to unite all the Arabs and the Muslims to fight these invading Crusaders, and yet maintain with the strong sect of the medieval period, where people used to slaughter the prisoners of war, and yet Salah ad-Din was the one who released them, and he refused, and he paid even the ransom for those who were not able to pay. When you look at Salah ad-Din in the early years in Cairo, when he was a minister of Al-Adid, and he was able to control the situation and remove the Fatimid from ruling Egypt and found his new dynasty, people would look at him and say, this was a great tyrant, and definitely this man was a brute man. He was not. He was the product of his time, of his age, of the circumstances that he was ruling in, and he was the product of the targets that he was putting in his mind. The strong aim for him was to contain the advance of the Crusaders, to defend the Middle East from these invaders, and to control the situation for the sake of the people who were living there. So should he have done that? Well, when you look at the other side, they have been using the Crusaders and advising them and asking them to come to Egypt to invade it. There were two times that there were two crusades coming to Egypt under the auspice of the people who were living and working for Al-Adid, and working after that for the Fatimids. They were trying to resurrect the Fatimids by taking cover and taking chance to involve the Crusaders in defeating Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. This is frankly what we call treason. So when Salah ad-Din decided that he is going to try them and send them either to exile, the minor ones, and to kill the other ones or sentence them to death, well, this is self-explanatory, even with the terms of what we are living in these days. So how to look at Salah ad-Din, with or against? Definitely you have to read in a transparent way the lives and the times of these people, how they were living and how they were functioning. So the book of the Days of Blood, it's a carefully researched book, a researched work by Walid Fikri, and at the same time he has written a careful prose where he is joining and knitting all these stories under the famous way of doing it as if it's a novel. So putting all these short stories together will make it amusing, and at the same time very nurturing for the reader and at the same time giving him a lot of information. A book that deserves to be read.
Okay, so back again, word of info, and you can call us at 2578-9407. So back again, word of info and the book, the final book. The
final book is the fourth book, and it is by General Stanley McChrystal, and he is a U.S. Army retired general, and it's called Leaders, Myth and Reality. Well, this is an interesting book. All through his career, McChrystal, who served for distinguished service for 34 years in the American Army, ended up his career by being the commander-in-chief of the American forces in Afghanistan. And after a dispute with President Obama, he was forced to resign from his job and retired, and then became a strategist and an expert, and founding his own establishment, which is called the McChrystal establishment. Anyway, what we are interested to know was that the fact he had always a question ever since he was a student in West Point and onwards: what defines a leader? What makes a leader a good one, and what makes him a bad one, and what makes really a leader great? And all this, he didn't just concentrate in writing about 13 important persons who were he himself considered to be accomplished leaders. When he looked at this collection of leaders, he decided that he is going to pick 13 of them. Why? Because there is a classical book by Plutarch, which is called Lives. And this is a book about the Romanian gentleman from Rome who has compared leaders from different sects, from the Greek times and from the Roman times. And he was discussing 12 of them, 6 Romans in comparison to 6 Greeks, and one person that he has given him a chapter for his own. So this book has been read by almost all the young officers and leaders in the Western world for quite a long time. And McChrystal decided that he's going to write a book, but from taking the same idea of Plutarch, Lives, but about leaders. And he decided to call it Leaders, the Myth and Reality, through analyzing different types of leaders and deciding how should we define them as great leaders or bad ones. And he has taken the sole character that he decided to overexpose was that for General Lee, because General Lee is a Confederate commander who, before he joined the Confederate forces, was an officer in the American Army, a very distinguished gentleman who was an engineer and an officer, and he was even the senior intendant of the West Point. But because he was from the South, when he was approached by the Confederate Army, he decided that he's going to become their commander, and he decided to stay behind a very immoral cause, because the immoral cause of the Confederates was just to keep slavery going on. And so in the Civil War, he has chosen the wrong side immorally, because simply he belonged to this side geographically, and this was his state. So for many years afterwards, Lee has been always canonized, considered to be like a saint. Everywhere you have a statue, especially in the south, of Lee, talking about his success as an officer, his success as a general in fighting his fellow Union army. And then we're looking to him now in the years to follow. And when you are looking to Lee today, and he was considered by McChrystal himself to be a favorite hero, because he had the wit, he had the charm, he had the intelligence, he had the leadership traits, and he was able to defeat a lot of and win in a lot of battles. So strategically, he's a very clever general, and he's a very distinguished human being. But actually, he is not, because simply he was a man who decided to join the wrong side of the battle, the man who was defending the rights to keep slaves. And so canonizing such a man, making him a saint like it is nowadays in the United States, or even a lot of officers and soldiers are looking to him with great praise, he thinks that this was totally wrong from his side and from the either point of the coin, if we may use. So he says, for example, that he was living in the quarters in West Point where one of the buildings was called after General Lee. So is this right or wrong? This is the idea or the myth. Is he a great leader or a bad one? So on the human being level, he's a good man, but on the decision that he made to join force with the Confederates who were going onto a very immoral section, this is very interesting. The two characters that he really compared were really of very great interest, the entrepreneurs, like Walt Disney and Coco Chanel, as leaders of their class, as leaders of their business, how they were able to make a brand that is really related to themselves, to their persona, in spite of the fact that he's having, whether this was Walt Disney or Coco Chanel, they are having a lot of people that are working in their establishment, but everybody really related to this brand as Walt Disney or Coco Chanel. And when he decided, for example, to write about the zealots are bad leaders, but they were able to be successful ones in spite of the fact that they are totally immoral, like Maximilian Robespierre and Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. And then when talking about Margaret Thatcher and Both Street, who were both British politicians and who were able to change and reverse the dice of how to become a leader. And putting also the comparison between Martin Luther King and Martin Luther, the famous clergyman who was able to establish the Protestant church. So in writing and in comparing all these types of personalities, he's trying to answer the most important question: how people can become leaders and how can people become immortal leaders. And actually, it's a myth. We can never understand what makes people so special and what makes people so able and capable of changing the fate of others by controlling the situation. So after the break, we'll tell you another example from the leaders by General McChrystal.
So back again, World of Info, and you had more leaders to talk about.
Well, actually, we have to sort out everything that we have said today. Definitely, the book by McChrystal is a bestseller. It's because it's discussing how leaders can form, how leaders can really change the world, and how leaders are the ones who are really actually successful because they are the ones who can really fight their own demons. Because a leader is a man who can really face tragedy and face despair, and yet he is able to stand the defeats as much as he is enjoying the victories. Because definitely when you are talking about how he can survive a tragedy, there is nothing better than what was he describing when Churchill said or written in one of his important saying about that a medium at your disposal which offers real power if you only can find out how to use it. And this medium is not politics, and it's not strength, and it's not the character. It's simply painting. Because it's the way that this strong leader has escaped to in order to fight the depression after a great defeat. So a leader is a man or a character or a human being who's able not only to stand and enjoy victories, but also to face defeat with dignity and self-respect. Today I hope I have presented the glimpse of 4 books that deserve to be read. Days of Blood by Walid Fikri, Omar Tahir, Kuhl Habbahan, and The Freakonomics, or Think Like a Freak by Levitt and Dubner, and Leaders by McChrystal. The books deserve to be read.
Yes. And by this we come to the end of World of Info. Dua Muhammad was at the controls. I'm Najla Naguib with Dr. Amr Mabrouk, Professor of Plastic Surgery at Ain Shams University. See you next Thursday, same time, same station, FM 95.4.